Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Mary and today I'm going to show you how to make a turkey. You can make one like this or one like this, whichever you prefer. For this tutorial, like most of them, I try to make it beginner friendly by going over all the skills and stitches, but I also try to work at a decent pace, so please feel free to speed up or slow down the video to your preference. And if you'd rather follow the written pattern, you can find the PDF in my shop, and it also comes with how to make these fall hats and these scarves, which by the way also matches the hats and birds in my fruit goose pattern and spring duck pattern if you want to mix and match them. Also, a huge shout out and thank you to those of you on Patreon for making this tutorial possible. This turkey pattern wouldn't have even existed without y'all, so thank you for choosing it and inspiring me to create it and giving me the support to continue to make patterns like this for you. Honestly, I can't even describe how much it means to me, and I sometimes still can't believe that so many of you love my art enough to support me in this way, so thank you again with all of my heart. I am using US crochet terms in this tutorial, and you will need some yarn in yellow, red, orange, up to 2 shades of brown. I use a darker brown for the tail, but you can use the same shade or swap the colors out. I'm also using 2 shades of red for the red head and the snood. Also, the yarn that I'm using is Bernat Blanket, which is a size 6 yarn, and I'm using a 5mm hook. You can use a different yarn or hook, but just make sure that the hook goes well with the yarn. For crocheting plushies, you should size down on your hook for less holes in your project. You'll also need some stuffing, scissors, a yarn needle, and for the eyes, I'm using 18mm safety eyes, but you can use something else such as felt, buttons, or even just embroider them on with yarn. I also recommend a stitch marker, but if you don't have one, you can use anything that you can attach or detach from the stitch. We're going to start by making the base, starting with the head, so grab the color that you want to use for the head. I'm making a turkey with a red head, so I'm using red to start, but if you want to make a turkey that's all brown, then start with brown. Then we're going to start by making a magic circle, so if you don't know how to do that, start by pinching the yarn between the thumb and the pointer finger, and then wrap the yarn around the pointer and the middle finger, forming an X, and then go underneath that X, grab that lower strand of yarn and pull it underneath the X, exiting out the top, and then rotate the hook and go over the X this time, and then grab that lower strand of yarn and pull it for the loop on the hook. That's how you make a magic circle, and if you do need a little bit more of a detailed, slower tutorial, I'll link that in the description below. Now we have to put 6 single crochets inside of the magic circle. So to do that, insert your hook into the circle. Make sure that you're going underneath both strands of yarn. And then let's grab the yarn and pull it through the circle. And then grab the yarn again and pull it through the 2 loops on the hook. That's how you make a single crochet inside of the magic circle. So repeat this 5 more times to make 6 single crochets total. Once you have your 6 single crochets, go ahead and grab the end of the yarn and pull on it to tighten up the circle. Let's grab a stitch marker and place it into the last stitch that we just made. This will help us keep track of the end of the round. A stitch looks like 2 strands of yarn going into a V shape. Place a stitch marker into the stitch that's attached to the loop on the hook. And now we can go into round 2, and for round 2 we're making 6 increases for a total of 12 stitches. An increase is just 2 single crochets inside of the same stitch, so skipping that knob in the front, let's go into that first stitch. Remember, a stitch looks like 2 strands of yarn going into a V shape, and then treating it like the magic circle, we're going to grab the yarn and pull it through the stitch and then for the 2 loops on the hook. That's how to make a single crochet inside of a stitch, but since we're making an increase, we need to repeat this a second time inside of that same stitch to make a second single crochet. So going to the same first stitch again, we're going to grab the yarn and pull it through the stitch and then for the 2 loops on the hook. Now going to the second stitch, we're going to repeat this again. So go into that second stitch and start by making 1 single crochet, and then go into that same exact second stitch again to make a second single crochet to make an increase. And same thing in the third stitch, we're making 2 single crochets inside of it to make an increase. And just repeat this for every single stitch all the way around, just 2 single crochets inside of every single stitch. When you reach a stitch with a stitch marker, that means that this is the last stitch in the round. So go ahead and take off the stitch marker and make your 2 single crochets instead of that last stitch, and you are done with the round. You should now have 12 stitches total, so let's count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. If you also have 12 stitches too, then we can move on to round 3. Don't forget to place your stitch marker into the last stitch that we made to mark the end of round 2. And then for round 3, we're making a single crochet and then an increase and repeat this 6 times for a total of 18 stitches. Going to that first stitch, this time we're only making 1 single crochet inside of this stitch. Now we're going to go into the second stitch, and in this second stitch, we're making 2 single crochets inside of it to make an increase. And then repeat this pattern again, so 1 single crochet inside of the next stitch. And then the stitch after that, we're making 2 single crochets inside of it to make that increase. And keep repeating this pattern, 1 single crochet in the next stitch, and then 2 single crochets in a stitch after that to make that increase. And then just keep repeating this for the entirety of the round for 6 times total, and you should end up with 18 stitches. Don't forget to count the stitches once you're finished with this round. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, and 18. If you also have 18 stitches too, then we can move on to round 4. For round 4, we're making 2 single crochets and then an increase and repeat this 6 times for 24 stitches total. So going through that first stitch, we're going to make 1 single crochet, and then in the second stitch, we're also making 1 single crochet, and then in the third stitch, we're making 2 single crochets inside of it to make that increase. And then repeat this pattern again, 1 single crochet in the next stitch, 1 single crochet in the stitch after that, and then 2 single crochets in that next stitch to make an increase. Just keep repeating this for the entire round, 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet, and then 2 single crochets to make that increase. So go ahead and finish off the rest of the round with this exact same pattern, 2 single crochets and then an increase, and repeat until you get to the very end of the round where that stitch marker is, and you should end up with 24 stitches total. So after finishing round 4, this is what your piece should look like. And sometimes if you are using a thicker yarn with tighter stitches like I am, you might get a little bit of a pointy top like mine looks like right now. So what you can do is just pull on the sides a little bit like this, and that helps stretch out the top stitches a little bit more and helps to flatten out the surface. I usually naturally do this during stuffing, but a few years ago a follower sent me a video that suggested doing this specifically, so I thought it would be helpful to mention it. Unfortunately, I can't find the message or who the creator is anymore, but shout out to you if you're watching this. So for round 5, we're making 3 single crochets and then an increase, and repeat this 6 times for a total of 30 stitches. So going to that first stitch, make 1 single crochet, same thing in the second stitch, 1 single crochet, same thing in the third stitch, 1 single crochet, and then in that fourth stitch, we're making 2 single crochets to make an increase. We're just repeating this pattern for the entire round, 1 single crochet in the first stitch, 1 single crochet in the second stitch, 1 single crochet in the third stitch, and then 2 single crochets in the fourth stitch to make an increase. And keep repeating this, 1 single crochet in the next 3 stitches, and then 2 single crochets to make an increase. So go ahead and finish off the rest of the round. Remember, just make 3 single crochets and then an increase all the way till you get to the end where that stitch marker is, and you should end up with 30 stitches total. And then for round 6, we're making 4 single crochets and then an increase, and repeat this 6 times for 36 stitches total. So going to that first stitch, we're going to be making 1 single crochet, same thing in the second stitch, 1 single crochet, same thing in the third stitch, 1 single crochet, and same thing in that fourth stitch, 1 single crochet, and then we're making our increase in that fifth stitch, so 2 single crochets. And then just repeat this pattern again, so make 4 single crochets or 1 single crochet in the next 4 stitches. And then we're making an increase, so 2 single crochets inside that fifth stitch. Just repeat this pattern 4 more times for 6 times total, and you should reach the end of the round and have 36 stitches total. So I'll go ahead and let you do that, and I'll meet you at the very end of this round. So again, if you have a bit of a point forming at the top again, you can go ahead and pull on the sides to stretch out the top stitches a little bit more to get that flatter surface. And then for round 7, we're just making 36 single crochets for 36 stitches total. So that just means making 1 single crochet in every single stitch all the way around. So go into that first stitch and make 1 single crochet. Same thing in the second stitch, 1 single crochet. Same thing in the third stitch, 1 single crochet, and so on. 1 single crochet in the fourth stitch, 1 single crochet in the fifth stitch. Just continue making 1 single crochet in every single stitch all the way until you reach the end of the round, and you should have made 36 single crochets total for 36 stitches again. So this is what it should look like once you're done with round 7, and then for the next 6 rounds, rounds 8 to 13, we're repeating the exact same thing of 36 single crochets for 36 stitches total for each round. So just make 1 single crochet in every single stitch for the next 6 rounds, and I'll meet you when you're done. And here's what the head should look like once you're finished with those rounds. You should have 13 rounds total, so let's count them to make sure that we're in the same place. Starting where that magic circle is, that's our round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. If you also have 13 too, then we can move on to round 14. For round 14, we're making 4 single crochets and then a decrease and repeat this 6 times for a total of 30 stitches. Let's go into that first stitch and just make 1 single crochet. Same thing in the second stitch, 1 single crochet. Same thing in the third stitch, 1 single crochet. Same thing in the fourth stitch, 1 single crochet. And then it's time for the decrease. So a decrease is the opposite of an increase. So instead of adding a stitch, we're taking one out. I like to use the invisible decrease method. I think it's better for crocheting plushies, so that's what I'm going to show you. But if you prefer the regular decrease, you can also use that if you want to. So to make the invisible decrease though, we're going to go for the front loops only of the next 2 stitches. So each stitch has 2 loops. Do you remember these 2 strands of yarn that make up the top of each stitch? There's a back loop and then there's a front loop. So when we're making the invisible decrease, we're only going for that front loop and we're ignoring the back loop. And then we're going to go for the front loop of the next stitch as well. So we're going for the front loops of these next 2 stitches, ignoring the back loops. And then we're going to grab the yarn and pull for both front loops. And then we're going to grab the yarn again and pull for those 2 loops left on the hook. I'm so sorry that I had to cut the video in the middle of that, so if it wasn't really clear, we are repeating this pattern again in this round, so I'll show you the invisible decrease once more in this next set. So once again, we're making 1 single crochet in the next 4 stitches. And then again, we're making our invisible decrease, so we're going for the front loops only of the next 2 stitches, then grab the yarn and pull for those 2 front loops, and then for the 2 loops on the hook. And just keep repeating this pattern, 4 single crochets and then a decrease all the way until you get to the very end of the round, and you should end up with 30 stitches total. When you're done, you should have 30 stitches total. Make sure to count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. So for round 15, we're making 3 single crochets and then a decrease and repeat this 6 times for a total of 24 stitches. So going to that first stitch, we're just going to make 1 single crochet. Same thing in the second stitch, we're making 1 single crochet. Same thing in the third stitch, 1 single crochet, and then we're making that decrease or invisible decrease like I like to make. And then just repeat this pattern again to finish off the rest of the round. So make 3 single crochets or 1 single crochet in the next 3 stitches and then a decrease, and then repeat this for 6 times total to get 24 stitches at the end of the round. And once you're done, you should have 24 stitches, so make sure that you're counting them. And then for round 16, we're making 2 single crochets and then a decrease and repeat this 6 times for 18 stitches total. So in that first stitch, we're making 1 single crochet. Same thing in the second stitch, 1 single crochet, and then we're making a decrease. And then just repeat this again, 2 single crochets, and then a decrease. And then just keep repeating this, 2 single crochets and a decrease, and repeat for the entire round, and you should end up with 18 stitches total. Once you're finished, this is what your piece should look like. You should have 18 stitches total, so make sure that you're counting them. And then if your turkey is on the smaller side, or it seems like it might be difficult later on to reach your hand inside to attach the eyes, then you may want to attach them now first. But depending on where you place the eyes, you might need to adjust the stitches later on to make sure that the back side of the turkey is still on the opposite side of the eyes. That's why, if at all possible, I do suggest adding the eyes after you make the back side of the turkey, but if your turkey is on the smaller side, then you might have to add them now first. So if you are placing them now, then I would recommend placing them on the opposite side of this section where the start and the end of the rounds are. So this will be the front of the face, and place them between rounds 10 and 11 around 6 stitches apart. Moving on to rounds 17 to 19, we're just making 18 single crochets for 18 stitches total for each round. So just make 1 single crochet in every single stitch for all 3 rounds. So very similar to what we did in rounds 17 to 13, just 1 single crochet in the first stitch, 1 single crochet in the second stitch, 1 single crochet in the third stitch, and so on for the entire round, and same thing for rounds 18 and 19 as well. So go ahead and finish these 3 rounds, and then I'll meet you when you're done. And we're back. You should have finished your 3 rounds of 18 single crochets and your piece should look like this. You should have 19 rounds total, so let's count them starting from that magic circle. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19. If you also have 19 rounds too, then we can move on to round 20. And for round 20, we're making 2 single crochets and then an increase and repeat this 6 times for a total of 24 stitches. But if you are making a redhead turkey like I am, now is the time to change color to the body color brown. If you're not changing colors, then you can skip this, but if you are, start by pulling out half of the last single crochet that you made in the red. Now you should have the 2 loops on the hook. Then grab the brown yarn and pull for the 2 loops on the hook. Then tie off the 2 ends of the yarns. Then cut off the red yarn and you can just hide the tail inside of the plushie. We can now go ahead to work with the brown yarn, but to create a more seamless stripe between the rounds of colors, I like to do this color changing method that's kind of like a join. So in that first stitch, instead of a single crochet, we're going to be making a slip stitch and then a chain 1 instead, and that will replace that first single crochet. So to make a slip stitch, go into the stitch and then grab the yarn and pull it through the stitch and then directly through the loop on the hook. Then we're going to chain 1 by grabbing the yarn and pulling it through the loop on the hook. And that counts as our first stitch. And remember, this is only for changing colors in a new round. So if you're not changing colors, just make your single crochet like usual. Now the rest of the round is made just like normal. So make a single crochet in the second stitch and then make 2 single crochets in that third stitch to make an increase. And then repeat this pattern, 1 single crochet in the first stitch, 1 single crochet in the second stitch, and then 2 single crochets in that third stitch to make an increase. And keep repeating this, 2 single crochets, and then an increase. And then just keep repeating this until you get to the very end of the round. Once you get to the very end of this round, you should have 24 stitches total if you didn't change color, and if you did change color and use my method, we do have 25 stitches because of that chain 1 and slip stitch. So for round 21, we're making 3 single crochets and then an increase and repeat this 6 times for a total of 30 stitches. So if you did not change color, then you can go ahead and make this round just like normal. If you did change color, then we have one last step to do. So since we have an extra stitch from that slip stitch and chain 1 in the last round, what we're going to do is skip that first stitch and go into that second stitch and work from there. So we're skipping that slip stitch that we made and go into that chain 1 instead. And here's where we're going to make our first single crochet of this round. And what this does is it kind of connects the start and end of the round a little bit better so the color changes look more like a line than a spiral, because if we use a normal color changing method, the stitches will line up more like this. So this method evens out the height a bit more and makes it look smoother. Let's continue with the round. Again, we're making a single crochet in the next stitch. Same thing in the stitch after that, also a single crochet inside of that stitch. And then we're making 2 single crochets to make an increase. So let's repeat this pattern again, 3 single crochets, so 1 single crochet in the next 3 stitches. And then we're making 2 single crochets in that next stitch to make an increase. Once again, 1 single crochet in the next 3 stitches, and then 2 single crochets to make that increase. And just keep repeating this all the way around, 3 single crochets and an increase, and repeat until you get to the very end of the round, and you should end up with 30 stitches total. For round 22, we're making 27 single crochets and 3 increases for 33 stitches total. So go into that first stitch and make 1 single crochet. Same thing in the second stitch, 1 single crochet. Same thing in the third stitch, 1 single crochet. Same thing in the fourth stitch, 1 single crochet, and so on until you reach 27. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, and 27. Should now have just 3 stitches left to finish off the round for our 3 increases, and what these increases are going to do is make the back of the turkey. So go into that next stitch and make 2 single crochets inside of that stitch to make an increase. Same thing in the next stitch, 2 single crochets inside of that one to make an increase, and finally in the last stitch with the stitch marker, make 2 single crochets inside of it to make an increase. You should now have 33 stitches, make sure to count them, and then for round 23, we're making 3 increases, 27 single crochets, and then 3 increases for 39 stitches total. So go into that first stitch and make 2 single crochets inside of it to make an increase, and then same thing in the next stitch, 2 single crochets to make an increase. Same thing in the third stitch, 2 single crochets to make an increase. And if you placed the eyes already earlier, check to make sure that these 6 increases are directly across from where you placed the eyes. If they're not, then instead make these 6 increases in a spot where they're directly across from where the eyes are placed, and all the other stitches are single crochets. Now let's make 27 single crochets, so go into that next stitch and make a single crochet. Same thing in the next stitch, a single crochet, and so on. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, and 27. And finally, we're going to make 3 increases to finish off the rest of the round. So make 2 single crochets inside of that next stitch to make an increase. And then again, make 2 single crochets in the next stitch to make an increase. And finally, let's remove that stitch marker in that last stitch and make our final 2 single crochets inside of it to make an increase in this round. And you should now have 39 stitches total. For round 24, we're making 3 increases and 36 single crochets for 42 stitches total. So let's go into that first stitch and make 2 single crochets to make an increase. Same thing in the second stitch, make 2 single crochets to make an increase. Same thing in the third stitch, make 2 single crochets to make an increase. Now we're just going to make 36 single crochets for 36 stitches total, so just make 1 single crochet in every single stitch all the way till you get to the very end of the round, and you should end up with 42 stitches. So I'll go ahead and let you finish off the round by yourself, and then I'll meet you when you're done. And here's what your turkey should look like now. And now that we made the back side of the turkey, let's go ahead and add the eyes. So for the eyes, we want to add them on the opposite side of this back part, this part that's sticking out. And we want to attach them between rounds 10 and 11, around 6 stitches apart. It can be helpful to add a little bit of stuffing first to help shape out the head a little bit more so you can get a better idea on where to place the eyes. Just don't add too much so you still have space to reach inside and attach the eyes. Now on to adding the eyes, let's count the rounds starting with round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And so we're going to place the eyes between rounds 10 and 11. And then let's count 6 stitches to the side. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And let's place the second eye here. And then check to make sure that they're lined up properly to the back side of the turkey. Mine are a little bit off, so I'm moving them a few stitches over. And once you're happy with the placement, go ahead and add the backings to secure the eyes. Then go ahead and finish adding stuffing to the head of the turkey. Now for rounds 25 to 28, we're making 42 single crochets for 42 stitches total for each round. So that means that we're making 1 single crochet in every single stitch for all 4 of those rounds. It's very similar to what we did in rounds 17 to 19 and rounds 7 to 13, so just 1 single crochet in every single stitch for the next 4 rounds. So go ahead and finish those 4 rounds, and then I'll meet you when you're done. Once you're finished, this is what your piece should look like. You should have 28 rounds total, so let's count them starting from the very top where that magic circle is. That's our round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. If you also have 28 rounds too, then we can move on to round 29. And now we're going to start to close up the body of the turkey. So for round 29, we're making 5 single crochets and then a decrease, and repeat this 6 times for a total of 36 stitches. So going to that first stitch, let's make 1 single crochet. Same thing in the second stitch, 1 single crochet. Same thing in the third stitch, 1 single crochet. Same thing in the fourth stitch, 1 single crochet. Same thing in the fifth stitch, 1 single crochet. And then now let's make our decrease, or the invisible decrease like I like to do. So going for the front loops only of the next 2 stitches, grab the yarn and pour for those 2 front loops, and then for the 2 loops on the hook. And then just repeat this again for the entire round, 5 single crochets and a decrease, and repeat this for 6 times total, and you should again end up with 36 stitches. So I'll let you go finish that, and then I'll meet you for round 30. So as we're finishing each of the rounds, keep adding stuffing as we go. And then for round 30, we're making 4 single crochets and a decrease, and repeat this 6 times for 30 stitches total. So go into that first stitch and make 1 single crochet. Same thing in the second stitch, 1 single crochet. Same thing in the third stitch, 1 single crochet. Same thing in the fourth stitch, 1 single crochet. And then now we're making our decrease, or invisible decrease like I like to do. And then repeat this pattern again, 4 single crochets and then a decrease, and repeat this all the way till you get to the very end of the round for 6 times total. And you should end up with 30 stitches. So go ahead and finish that, and then I'll meet you for round 31. For round 31, we're making 3 single crochets and then a decrease, and repeat this 6 times for a total of 24 stitches. So go into that first stitch and make a single crochet. Same thing in the second stitch, a single crochet. Same thing in the third stitch, a single crochet. And then we're making our decrease, or invisible decrease like I like to do. And then again, repeating this pattern for the entire round, 3 single crochets and then a decrease. And repeat all the way till you get to the very end of the round, and you should end up with 24 stitches total. So go ahead and finish off the round, and I'll meet you for round 32. So here's what your turkey should look like after finishing round 31, and don't forget to add stuffing as you finish each round. And then for round 32, we're making 2 single crochets and then a decrease, and repeat this 6 times for a total of 18 stitches. So go into that first stitch and make a single crochet. Same thing in the second stitch, a single crochet, and then now we're going to make our decrease, or invisible decrease. And then just keep repeating this pattern of 2 single crochets and then a decrease all the way till you get to the very end of the round for 6 times total, and you should end up with 18 stitches. So go ahead and finish off this round, and then I'll meet you for round 33. Don't forget to add stuffing after you're done, and then for round 33, we're going to be making a single crochet and then a decrease, and repeat this 6 times for a total of 12 stitches. So go into that first stitch and make a single crochet, and then we're making a decrease, or invisible decrease, right after that. And then just repeat this pattern again, make 1 single crochet, and then a decrease. And then just keep repeating this pattern, single crochet, decrease, all the way till you get to the very end of the round, and you should end up with 12 stitches total. Finally, we're on our last round. So for round 34, making 6 decreases for 6 stitches total. Go into the front loops of the first 2 stitches, and then grab the yarn and pour for those 2 front loops, and then for the 2 loops on the hook to make that first decrease. And then just keep repeating this for the entire round for 6 decreases total. And then we're done with the body of the turkey, so let's fasten off, grab the yarn, and pour for the loop on the hook. And then it's time to cut off the yarn, but we do want to leave a bit of extra yarn to sew the plushie closed. So after cutting off the yarn, go ahead and pull on the yarn until it's pulled all the way through the loop. Now add any last stuffing that you want to add before we close out the plushie. Then grab a needle and thread the yarn tail through it, and now we're going to sew up the plushie by going in for the front loops of each of the stitches. So go into that first stitch, and then go out the second stitch, and then go into the next stitch, and then out again, back in, and out once more. And then just pull on the yarn to close up the hole. Now you can hide the yarn tail directly in the plushie now, or I like to sew a few more times for the stitches to help neaten it up. And then to secure it, I leave a little slack to push a needle through and then pull tight. And then if you want to, you can also add a knot, or you can just go straight into hiding the yarn inside of the plushie. So pull the yarn all the way through to the other side of the body, and then if you have some extra yarn, go for the same spot again, and then pull the yarn through to another side, and this just helps the yarn get really caught up inside. And once you're ready to cut off the yarn, push down on the plushie and then cut off the yarn, and then just puff out the plushie again to hide the yarn tail fully inside, and you are done with the base of the turkey. Now let's make the wings. So again, we're going to use brown, and again, we're going to start with a magic circle. So grab that lower strand of yarn and pull it underneath the X, rotate the hook, go over the X, and grab that lower strand of yarn again and pull it through the loop on the hook. And this time we're making 3 single crochets inside of the magic circle. So go into the circle, grab the yarn and pull it through, and then for the 2 loops on the hook. And then repeat this 2 more times to make 3 single crochets inside of the magic circle. Pull on the yarn tail to tighten up the circle, and now we can move on to round 2. So for round 2, we're making 3 increases for a total of 6 stitches. So go into that first stitch, skipping that knob in the front, then grab the yarn and pull it through the stitch, and then for the 2 loops on the hook, and then go back into the same exact first stitch again and repeat this a second time to make an increase. And now repeat this in the second stitch, make 2 single crochets inside of it to make an increase. And then now we're on the stitch with the stitch marker, and we're going to make our final increase in this round by making 2 single crochets inside of that stitch. And you should now have 6 stitches total, and make sure to count them. Also, my piece is technically inside out right now, so I'm going to push the inside to the outside. For round 3, we're making 6 increases for a total of 12 stitches. Go into that first stitch and make 2 single crochets inside of it to make an increase. Same thing in the second stitch, we're also making 2 single crochets inside of it to make an increase. Same thing in the third stitch, we're also making 2 single crochets inside of it to make an increase, and we're just repeating this for the entire round. Just make 2 single crochets to make an increase in every single stitch. And you should now have 12 stitches total. And then for round 4, we're just making 12 single crochets for 12 stitches total. So go into that first stitch and just make 1 single crochet. Same thing in the second stitch, 1 single crochet. Same thing in the third stitch, 1 single crochet, and so on. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12. And then for round 5, we're just repeating the exact same thing that we just did in round 4, so 12 single crochets for 12 stitches total, or just make 1 single crochet in every single stitch. For round 6, we're making 6 decreases for 6 stitches total. So like before, I'm using the invisible decrease method by going through the front loops of the next 2 stitches, grabbing the yarn and pulling it through those front loops, and then for the 2 loops on the hook, and then just repeat for the entire round for 6 decreases. Once you're done, just add a little bit of stuffing. And then now for the last round, we're going to fold the remaining stitches in half. So basically just press the opening together like this, lining up the first and the last stitch. And then we're going to make 3 single crochets going for the stitches on both sides. Make sure that you inserted your hook underneath both the first and the last stitch, and then grab the yarn and pull it through both of those stitches. And then grab the yarn and pull for the 2 loops on the hook. And then same thing again, go into the next stitch and also stitch across from it, so underneath both stitches on both sides, and then grab the yarn and pull it through, and then for the 2 loops on the hook. And then finally going for that last stitch and the stitch on the other side of the opening, grab the yarn and pull it through, and then for the 2 loops on the hook. And this closes up the wing and also makes the wing a little bit flatter. And now let's fasten off, so grab the yarn and pull it through the loop on the hook. And then we want to leave some extra yarn to sew the wing onto the body later, so cut off that yarn and then pull the yarn all the way through. And we are finished with one of the wings. And then just repeat this again to make a second wing. Once you're finished with both wings, let's move on to making the beak. So using a yellow yarn, let's again start with the magic circle. Grab that lower strand of yarn on top of the middle finger, pull it underneath the X, rotate the hook, go over the X, and grab that lower strand again and pull it through the loop on the hook. And this time we're making 4 single crochets inside of the magic circle. So insert the hook into the circle, grab the yarn and pull it through, and then grab the yarn and pull it for the 2 loops on the hook, and repeat this again 3 more times to make 4 single crochets total. Pull on the yarn to tighten up the circle, and now we can move on to round 2. And for round 2, we're making a single crochet and then an increase, and repeat this 6 times for a total of 6 stitches. So insert the hook into that first stitch and make just 1 single crochet inside of it. And then in the second stitch, we're making 2 single crochets inside of it to make an increase. And then repeat this again, 1 single crochet in the next stitch. And then in that last stitch with the stitch marker, we're making 2 single crochets inside of it to make an increase. Now we should have 6 stitches total. For round 3, we're making 2 single crochets and then an increase, and repeat this 2 times for a total of 8 stitches. So go into that first stitch and make 1 single crochet. Same thing in the second stitch, 1 single crochet. And then in the third stitch, we're making 2 single crochets inside of it to make an increase. And repeat this one more time, 1 single crochet, 1 single crochet, and then in that last stitch, we're making 2 single crochets inside of it to make an increase. Finally, we're on the last round, and for round 4, we're just making 8 single crochets for 8 stitches total. So just make 1 single crochet in each of the stitches all the way around. And then make a slip stitch into the first stitch, so insert the hook into that stitch, grab the yarn, pull it through, and then for the loop on the hook, and then finally just fasten off. Let's cut off the yarn, but leave a good amount of extra yarn to sew the beak onto the head later, and then pull that yarn all the way through, and then add just a little bit of stuffing. And then set the beak aside to sew on later. Let's make the snood, so grab the red yarn, and this time we're going to start with a chain 7. So to start that off, start by making a slip knot. So cross the end of the yarn over, making an oval, and then flip that oval over on top of the working yarn. Then grab the yarn through the oval and also grab the end of the yarn and pull tight. Now that you have your slip knot, place it onto the hook and then grab the working yarn to tighten it up. Then let's chain 7, so grab the yarn and pull it through the loop on the hook, and then repeat this again 6 more times for 7 chains total. Now turning and starting from the second chain from the hook, make 5 single crochets and a slip stitch for 6 stitches total. So remember, we're starting from the second chain from the hook, so we're skipping this first chain and going into the second chain. Insert your hook into the chain, then grab the yarn and pull it through the chain, and then for the 2 loops on the hook. Repeat this again in the next chain to also make a single crochet, and so on. 3, 4, 5, and then in the last one we're making a slip stitch, so grab the yarn and pull it through and then directly through the loop on the hook. And we are done, so grab the yarn to pull it for the loop to fasten off, and then leave a little bit of extra yarn for sewing later. Now let's make the tail, so grab the yarn that you want to use. I'm using a darker brown, and again we're going to start with the magic circle. And this time we're making 8 single crochets inside of the magic circle. So grab the yarn through the circle and then for the 2 loops on the hook, and then repeat this 7 more times for 8 single crochets total. For round 2, we're making 8 increases for a total of 16 stitches. So go into that first stitch and make 2 single crochets inside of it to make an increase. Same thing in the second stitch, also 2 single crochets inside of it to make an increase. Same thing in the third stitch, 2 single crochets to make an increase. And just repeat this for the entire round, just make 2 single crochets in each stitch. And when you get to the very end of the round, you should have 16 stitches total. For round 3, we're making a single crochet and then an increase, and repeat this 8 times for a total of 24 stitches. So go into that first stitch and make a single crochet, and then 2 single crochets in the second stitch to make an increase, and then repeat this pattern again, 1 single crochet in the next stitch, 2 single crochets in the stitch after that to make an increase. So go ahead and finish off the rest of the round with this pattern, single crochet, increase. Here's what the tail should look like once you're done with round 3, and then for round 4 we're making 24 single crochets for 24 stitches total. So just go into that first stitch and make a single crochet. Same thing in the second stitch, same thing in the third stitch, just one single crochet in every single stitch all the way around. So go ahead and finish that, and then I'll meet you for round 5. For round 5, we're making 2 single crochets and an increase, and repeat this 8 times for a total of 32 stitches. So go into that first stitch and make 1 single crochet. Same thing in the second stitch, 1 single crochet, and then we're making 2 single crochets in that third stitch to make an increase. And just keep repeating this pattern, 2 single crochets and an increase, all the way till you get to the very end of the round, and you should end up with 32 stitches total. So go ahead and finish off the rest of round 5, and I'll meet you for round 6. For round 6, we're making 32 single crochets for 32 stitches total. So just make 1 single crochet in every single stitch all the way around. So go into that first stitch and make 1 single crochet. Same thing in the second stitch, same thing in the third stitch. Just 1 single crochet in every single stitch of this round for 32 single crochets total. So go ahead and finish off this round, and then I'll meet you for round 7. For round 7, we are now changing color to our second color, orange, and we're going to be making 3 single crochets and an increase, and repeat this 8 times for a total of 40 stitches. So remember, to change color, we need to start in the stitch before, so pull out half of that stitch so you have the 2 loops on the hook, and then finish off that stitch with the new color instead. So pull that orange color for the 2 loops on the hook, and then just tie off those 2 strands of yarn, and then cut off the brown yarn. And then just like before, for a more seamless color change, let's use this method where we start with a slip stitch and then a chain 1, and this replaces the first single crochet of the round. So go into the second stitch and make a single crochet, same thing in the third stitch, a single crochet, and then in the fourth stitch make an increase, and then repeat this pattern again, 1 single crochet in the next 3 stitches, and then make 2 single crochets in the fourth stitch to make an increase. And then just keep repeating this pattern, 3 single crochets and an increase, and repeat this all the way till you get to the very end of the round. So go ahead and finish off the rest of the round, and I'll meet you for round 8. For round 8, we're just making 40 single crochets for 40 stitches total, so just 1 single crochet in every single stitch all the way around. If you did the slip stitch chain 1 color changing method that I did earlier, then we're going to skip that first stitch and go into the second stitch. So starting in that second stitch, we're going to make a single crochet, and that creates a more seamless stripe for our color change. And then we're going to go into the next stitch and also make a single crochet, same thing the stitch after that, a single crochet, just 1 single crochet in every single stitch all the way around for a total of 40 single crochets. So go ahead and finish that, and then I'll meet you for round 9. So your tail should look like this after finishing round 8, and then for round 9, we're going to fold the stitches in half. So we're making it flat in this half circle shape, and now we're going to be working across the stitches on both sides, similar to what we did with the wings. So we're going to be making a double crochet increase and a double crochet, and repeat this 10 times for a total of 30 stitches. But first we're going to start by chaining 3. And this chain 3 will count as the first double crochet in the row. So we're going to start with a double crochet increase, which is just 2 double crochets in the same stitch. But since the chain 3 counts as one of the double crochets, we're only going to make 1. To make a double crochet, start by wrapping the yarn around the hook, and then we're going to insert the hook into the first set of stitches. So you should be going through the first and last stitch of the previous round, and then grab the yarn and pull through both of those stitches. And then grab the yarn and pull through only the first 2 loops on the hook, and then grab the yarn again and pull for the last 2 loops on the hook. And that's how you make a double crochet. And now we're going to continue working for the stitches on both sides. So again, wrap the yarn around the hook, go into the next set of stitches, so go into the next stitch and also the one across from it, and then grab the yarn and pull through those 2 stitches, and then for the first 2 loops on the hook, and then the last 2 loops on the hook as well. And then we're going to go into the next stitch, and this time we're making a double crochet increase, so 2 double crochets in this next set of stitches. There's our first double crochet, and then repeat again to make a second one in those same stitches. And then let's go into the next stitch as well as the one across from it, and this time we're only making 1 double crochet. And then just keep repeating this until you get to the very end, working for the stitches on both sides, make a double crochet increase, and then a double crochet and repeat. So go ahead and finish off the rest of this row, and then I'll meet you for round 10. So here's what your tail should look like after crocheting to the very end of the row, and then for row 10, we're going to be changing color to red. There are a few ways to change colors. One way I've seen other crocheters do is fastening off here and then pulling up a loop in the new color. I also remember that there's something called the magic knot if you want to try that. For this one, I'm just going to change color in a way that's similar to what we've been doing already, but if you like another way more, feel free to do that instead. So like before, let's start by pulling out the last step of the last stitch so you have those 2 loops on the hook. And then grab the new color and pull it through those 2 loops. So you do want to leave a little bit of extra yarn so you can weave them in later. For row 10, we're making a double crochet increase and 2 double crochets and repeat this 10 times for 40 stitches total. So let's start off the row by chaining 3, and this will count as our first double crochet, and then turn by flipping the work over. And remember, for this row, we're starting with a double crochet increase, but since we already made the chain 3 and that counts as our first double crochet, we're going to make just 1 more double crochet instead of that first stitch for that increase. And then to follow the pattern, in the next stitch, we're making 1 double crochet. Same thing the stitch after that, also 1 double crochet. And now we're repeating the pattern again, so in this next stitch, we're making 2 double crochets inside of it to make an increase. And then we're making 1 double crochet in the next stitch, and 1 double crochet in the stitch after that as well. And just keep repeating this pattern, double crochet increase, and then 2 double crochets, and repeat until you get to the very end of the row, and you should end up with 40 stitches. So here's what the tail should look like after finishing the row, and then for row 11, we're changing color to yellow. So change color in the same way that we did in the previous row for the red. And just like before, start off the row by chaining 3, and then turn. And this time we're making a double crochet increase, a double crochet, and then a slip stitch, and repeat this 10 times for a total of 50 stitches. So since that chain 3 counts as our first double crochet, we're going to go straight into the second stitch this time, and we're going to make 2 double crochets inside of it to make an increase. Then in the next stitch, make 1 double crochet. And then in the next stitch, we're making a slip stitch. Now repeat this pattern again, a double crochet in the first stitch, and then 2 double crochets in the next stitch to make a double crochet increase, and then a double crochet in the next stitch, and then finally a slip stitch. And just keep repeating this pattern to finish off the rest of the row, a double crochet increase, a double crochet, and a slip stitch, and keep repeating this all the way till you get to the very end of the row, and you should have 50 stitches total. Once you get to the very end of the row, we are finished with the tail, so fasten off. And then using a needle, weave in all the ends. So the last thing that we have to crochet is the feet, and we're crocheting them directly onto the body. The feet should be roughly lined up with the eyes and between rounds 30 and 31. So let's count the rounds starting from where that magic circle is. That's our round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30, and 31. So between those 2 rounds is where we're placing the feet. So to start things off, we're going to start by making a slip knot. And then insert the hook between rounds 30 and 31. We're going to be making 3 single crochets along the body, so make sure that these next 3 stitches are roughly lined up with the placement of one of the eyes. And then go ahead and make your first single crochet, so grab the yarn and pull it through the stitch on the body, and then for the 2 loops on the hook. And then insert the hook into the next stitch, following along the rounds on the body, and then again make another single crochet. And then one more time in the next stitch, make a 3rd single crochet. Now for round 2, start by chaining 2, and then we're going to turn. This chain 2 does not count as a stitch, so in the first stitch, we're making a double crochet. Now we're going to work in the second stitch, and we're going to make a slip stitch. Then we're going to chain 2 again. Working back down the chain, starting from the second chain from the hook, we're going to make a single crochet. And we're going to go back to working along the row and make a slip stitch again in that second stitch. Finally, in the third stitch, we're making a double crochet. And then chain 1 and then make a final slip stitch inside of that third stitch. And here's what the foot should look like. And now we're finished. Go ahead and fasten off. And then weave in the ends, or I just like to tie them off and then hide them inside of the plushie. And then just repeat this again over here to make a second foot. Now let's sew on the beak centered between the eyes and onto rounds 12 and 13, which are these 2 rounds right here. This is just one row beneath where we place the eyes. So remember that long tail that we left behind when we fastened off? Well, we're going to use that to sew the beak onto the face. So using the needle, pull the yarn diagonally underneath round 12, and then we're going to sew along the stitches around the opening on the back of the beak. So push the needle through the next stitch on the beak and then pull the yarn through, and then we're going to insert the needle back into the same exact spot that we exited out of on the face, and this time move 1 stitch down. And then again through the next stitch on the beak and then back for the same spot we exited out of on the face, and move a stitch slightly to the side or following the circular shape of the beak, and just keep repeating this until you get all the way around. Once you get all the way around, I usually like to go over it a second or a third time just to make sure that everything is very secure. And once you're ready to secure off the yarn, we're going to do something pretty similar to what we did when we closed off the body. Leave a little slack to push the needle through and pull tight, and then hide the yarn inside of the plushie. Now let's sew on the snood. So this thinner end is the part that goes on the top of the beak. So sew this starting at the very center top of the beak against the face, lay it flat, and then sew down the piece to the top of the beak and then down the side of the beak as well. And when you're finished, you can tie them off or just go straight to hiding them inside of the plushie like before. Now let's sew on the wings, and we're going to sew them onto rounds 23 through rounds 25. Let's count the rounds. That's our round 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23. So we're going to sew the wings onto these 3 rounds. If you want to know how far back to place the wings, they should be around 3 stitches further back than the eyes, so around here. So thread the yarn that we left over when we fastened off through the needle, and then we are basically just sewing these 3 rounds of the body to those 3 stitches on the wings at a slight diagonal. So line up the stitches on those wings with those 3 rounds and sew them down. And then to hold the wing closer to the body, sew down a few extra rounds of the wing moving towards the back of the turkey. And then just secure off the yarn in the same way as the beak. And then in the same way, sew on the other wing on the other side. Then turn your turkey over, and the last thing that we have to do is sew on the tail. So grab some yarn to sew with. I would recommend using the same color as that bottom color on the tail. And then we're going to sew rounds 1 through 3 of the tail to round 25 through round 27 on the back of the body. So since the wings were sewed onto rounds 23 through rounds 25, you can use the wings to help you find the rounds. So the most bottom round that the wings are attached to is the highest round where the tail starts. So pull the yarn through the body, and then we're lining up these 3 rounds of the body to the first 3 rounds of the tail like this, and sew them together. If you have an extra needle or pin, I definitely recommend using it to hold the tail in place. It makes it a little bit easier while you're sewing. So just go through the body and the tail, and I kind of just work in a circle along these 3 rounds. That way I get more surface of the tail attached to the body, and it makes it more stable. And once you're finished, tie off the 2 ends of the yarn and hide them inside of the plushie. Congratulations, you finished your turkey. Let me know what you named it in the comments, and I hope you liked this tutorial, and if you did, please don't forget to leave a like or subscribe. It really does help me out a lot and lets me continue to make content like this for you. Until next time.